Joël Brierre is a yogi, teacher, psychedelic integration specialist, and IMHU trained spiritual emergence coach. Joël began training with curanderos in Peru in 2001. Eventually shifting his focus into a deep and devoted yoga practice, he began teaching yoga and meditation and soon moved to India to study in an ashram. He was reintroduced to plant medicine in 2009 and went on to study with various guides and facilitators of differing lineages. Joël now leads retreats and workshops around the world on the plant medicine and yoga connection. With over 10 years of teaching and multiple teacher trainings, Joël is certified at 500 ERYT. He assists individuals through pre- and post-psychedelic integration using a program he derived from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Mary Brierre's passion for end-of-life care began at the age of 12, where she would volunteer her summers being of service in care facilities for the elderly. The calling to become a death doula came with the passing of her grandfather, where she found herself effortlessly slipping into a state of service. Mary quickly dove in with both feet, becoming a certified death doula, and soon after, volunteering her time in hospice. Mary has a mission to rebrand death. Through training other death doulas, offering grief education, and sharing the Anamkara podcast, Mary is rebranding death by normalizing it. So everyone, please welcome Joël and Mary.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
How is everyone tonight?
Excellent.
Oh, good. So, who here, by show of hands, was at the talk we did for Lamps of the same title, Death and Psychedelics, about a month or so ago? One? All right, sweet. Well, it's not going to be entirely the same thing. So, first we're just going to take a moment and get dialed in. Let's all get on the same vibe, the same frequency. And find some silence, some stillness. So everybody bring your hands onto your knees, palms facing down. Close your eyes and roll your eyes onwards and upwards to your brow point. Just taking a moment to arrive here in the present moment. Through your nose, take a deep inhale. Now open your mouth and sigh it out. Yes. Another one like that. Deep inhale. Open your mouth, sigh it out. Now breathing in and out of your nose. Leaving behind any irritations from traffic, any residual twitches in the nervous system from your day. Offer a space to smooth it all out here. Leaving the past behind, saving the future for later, and simply being here now. I invite you to take this opportunity to begin surrendering in the areas in which you may hold resistance. Letting go when you feel tension arising. Finding yourself in a state of receptivity.
And with your eyes still closed and opening this space, I would like to read a poem by John Donahue, who is a author who has passed, but his words are his legacy. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, and azure blue, come to wake you in a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays and the Keurig of thought and the stain of the ocean blackens beneath you, may they come across the waters, a path of yellow moonlight, to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life.
Take a deep inhale through your nose. And again, side on out. And slowly blink your eyes open. All right. So, we're going to tackle some big topics this evening. And get into some real juicy stuff. But first, let's just explain a little bit about why we're here talking to you about this stuff. So my name is Joël Brierre, and as she said, I am a yogi. I've been studying yoga for about 15 years, teaching for a little over a decade, and before I was a yogi, I was a full-blown card-carrying psychonaut. I really enjoyed my entheogens in the 90s before I realized that they were entheogens. And really saw that there was something there. I saw that there was something to them that separated them from other substances. At that time, I was also using all the other substances, so we can say I didn't get the full effects then, but it cracked something open. Many years later, I am away from using all substances, including psychedelics, find myself in the midst of a very dedicated, serious yoga practice, living in the Virgin Islands with two of my teachers there. And I was reintroduced to entheogens around 2008 or 2009. And this time with yogic philosophy as a background, with this tool of self-inquiry, it was a whole different game. So from there, went around to a lot of places, got to study with a lot of amazing people, learned a lot of fun things. But the essence of what I realized was that all these different modalities, spiritual practices, lineages, tools are all just different paths to the same place. And I also saw that two of these paths, many paths, complement each other. And the path of the yogi and the path of the entheogen enthusiast, or a deep seeker of the inner and outer worlds, have very similar path, and they've just been separated by a bit of dogma. So it took many years kind of demystifying a lot of aspects of not only yoga, but demystifying a lot of aspects of psychedelia that has arisen, and finding the true connections in here. And it's been a wonderful thing. And we'll explain in a little while how we use this yogic philosophy as a practical container for preparation and integration of the psychedelic experience or spiritual emergence, as well as how it is used in association with end-of-life transitioning, as Ms. Mary, and this is as good a time as ever to introduce my lovely wife, Ms. Mary Brierre, who is an end-of-life doula.
Thank you. So we have different psychedelic backgrounds, but each psychedelic experience, I could say for myself, has brought me to a place of understanding my life, the patterns in my life, and it's shown to me the different ways that I have had opportunities to practice my death throughout my life. And so I think that psychedelics really helps bring to the surface these patterns and these opportunities that we have in this life to practice death. When we practice death, when we practice the end of a cycle, the loss of a loved one, a job, relationship, a work situation, we are giving ourselves another opportunity to strengthen the capacity at the end of our life, to be in full surrender to another process in our experience. I think that's what's so fascinating about psychedelics and the work that I do. I've kind of been seeing this, or not kind of, I've this front row seat to how psychedelics and end of life are merging so beautifully together and giving people these expressions of themselves, helping them work through regrets, unfinished business, and allowing them to feel the other side prior to their passing. The need of a death doula about 100 years ago would not really be present in America, so I kind of wanted to share with you the history of death in America. So 100 years ago-ish, when we were going through the Civil War, prior to that, death was in our families, it was in our houses. We would watch our neighbors pass away, we would watch new life come into the home, and so death and life were very much a part of everyday life, and it wasn't scary. And so when the Civil War came, a lot of families were feeling that emptiness inside of them, picturing that their loved ones were dying in a field away from them, and they were feeling incomplete. So our wonderful president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, came through and started hiring medical doctors to begin embalming bodies, therefore allowing the people to bring the bodies into the home and have a burial service that they could feel complete in. And so it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln began this process that these businesses started to take form, and mortuaries and end-of-life businesses started to come in, and we started to hand it over to somebody else. All good intentions. But once Abraham Lincoln passed away, he had an open procession, and people were able to witness the embalming process, and so it really took off from there. And so once we kind of handed over death to an outside entity, within a couple decades, death kind of became a rumor. Death became so far from us that it was something, when it presented itself back to us, we weren't equipped anymore to handle it. It was so unfamiliar to us. And so that's where the need of death doulas, I believe, is coming back. I believe that the baby boomers are having a huge impact on the deathing process today. They came in a really big way, and they are going out in a really big way. And the use of psychedelics is being woven in to all of that. They're finding the need for a doula, the need to have a psychedelic experience to help them transition and walk the road home feeling a little bit fuller. What is a death doula? I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what that scope of work looks like. I'm not sure if you guys have heard exactly what an end-of-life doula is, so I'm just going to go over that briefly. A death doula has a huge umbrella of work, and what we really do is we complement whatever healthcare system plan is in place. We're not there to change anything. We're not there to fix anything. For the same reasons that somebody would hire a birth doula is the same reasons why they hire a death doula. They see an emphasis on this transition and a need to bring in more sacredness with it. So what we do is we help people plan their vigils, so how they want to die, sense in the room, position of their bed. Would they like people to meditate 10 minutes prior to walking in the room? So we really give them the full capacity of how they want to hold space in that time, how they would like to go. We help them create legacy projects. Legacy projects are something that is really fun and exciting when we can bring in something that lasts past their death. Everybody wants to be remembered. Everybody doesn't. That seems to be the number one thing when I speak to people when they are passing and transitioning. Their number one fear, I would say, is they're not sure how they will be held after they go. Will they be remembered? And what will they be remembered by? And so the Legacy Project is a really beautiful way to tie in to who they were and how they could still make an imprint even long after their body goes. We help people through their grief, their grieving process, their early grieving process, by helping them design a new way to hold grief. Grief is, it should be like its own entity, I think sometimes from the death and dying process. It's connected, but it's its own treasure. It's its own teacher. And so we're really, right now, the death doulas and the community that I am a part of, we really come together and really come up with ways to relay the grieving process as a teacher, as opposed to something that they have to run from and not fully integrate and accept. So we're teaching that as well through breath work, through meditation, and natural processes throughout the body, teaching him how to release that. So that's the work I do, and like I said before, it's really interweaving and intertying. I'm having really beautiful experiences as people who are transitioning are looking for psychedelics as not a band-aid or anything like that, but just another way that they can hold death, their mortality. And so it's been a really beautiful process so far, and something that I really get a lot from. So that's what I do.
Thank you, my love.
Mm-hmm.
So, death and psychedelics. There's a few different types of death we're going to speak about this evening. We've just heard Mary speaking about physical death, the death of the physical body, which many people consider to be the end all, the full death. We're also going to speak a little bit about ego death, possibly one of the most overused and misunderstood terms in psychedelia today. We'll also talk about ego dissolution. I am going to make this distinction between ego death and dissolution simply for clarity. In ego death, I feel, is a tool used within the psyche to assist someone in letting go a little bit of this here play. We often encounter the ego death in the ayahuasca experience. I would say the ego death is where we witness our own death, where we witness our own ending in our body, decaying into the earth, becoming nutrients for the earth, and watching as that becomes soil and what births from that soil. And I feel that this is an amazing medicine for an individual to allow them to detach from this existence just a little bit. When you can see that there's something beyond all of this, it makes it a little easier to surrender. An ego dissolution, I would define separately as ego death. Ego dissolution is quite often experienced in the peak experience of our beloved sacrament 5-MeO-DMT, or Bufo alvarius, toad medicine, whatever you want to call it, the God molecule. We'll talk about it a lot tonight. But this dissolution of ego is less of a witnessing the self die, but more an action of surrendering the self into the infinite. What separates this medicine and its peak experience from others is its ability to put one in a non-dual state. So in the moment of surrendering, what are we surrendering? What are we letting go? We are surrendering ourself, our ego, our default mode network, if you will, our entire identity. And of course, this can be experienced painfully or horrifically, but quite often is it experienced in a very, very overwhelmingly powerful yet blissful reunion into something that is oh so familiar, yet so beyond our ability to conceive or imagine, to understand or communicate. So, the dissolution of ego I feel to be halfway between action and inaction, the surrendering of all that is, and what is on the other side of it is what makes it so special, because it is the surrendering of individual awareness, egoic identity, and merging with totality, merging with everything, all-pervasive energy. So, any of these three types of death can be very confronting. There is the obvious physical death, which is very natural to have a lot of fears about. At the point of ego death or ego dissolution, there can be a resistance of the mind. The mind can click on and say, oh my goodness, because everything that it knows, everything that is familiar with it, everything that it loves is quickly disappearing, faster than the mind knows what to do with it. And the mind doesn't understand really that there's more than all this. The grand mystery is far beyond what the mind can conceive. So if the mind thinks that you are going somewhere so quickly that you will never return, it may perceive it as death. It may perceive it as, I am dying. So this can be translated as a dying experience. So this is where we begin to really use or see the potential and the jewels in using yogic philosophy and assistance, the tools that Mary's learned with assisting the dying, in preparation, whether for actual death or for the death of the ego or dissolution of the ego. A great preparation tool we like to use is known as the 5 kleshas. The 5 kleshas in yogic philosophy are the 5 root causes of suffering. The first klesha is avidya, ignorance. Ignorance in our own true nature as infinite source. By show of hands, who here has experienced 5-MeO-DMT, or what they would feel as ego dissolution? All right. So we can all say, if we've experienced something like that, that it is beyond what we conceive. It transcends thought, it transcends language. But on the other side is a unitive sense. It is a sense of non-duality that is more real than we can imagine. And when I say non-duality, I mean a state of awareness where there is no longer a subject-object relationship. There is no you or me, there is no this or that, there is no other. It simply is all-pervasive energy. And it is fairly impossible to describe what that is like. So avidya is ignorance of our own true nature to pure, boundless source, infinite beings. The core philosophy of yogic study, or Hindu philosophy really, is Atman is Brahman. Atman, which is the individual soul, is the same as Brahman, totality, God, if you will. So we are the drop from the ocean, but also containing the information of the entire ocean within our drop. A yogic way to describe the fractal nature of our universe. The second klesha is asmita. Asmita is egoism. So if we have forgotten that we are all totality, we have forgotten that we are the field in which we exist, then we have defined and limited ourselves to this persona, to this character. I have defined myself to Joël. I am a yogi. I am an integration specialist. I am this, I am that. These titles, these stories that I've come up with for myself. So we have begun to separate ourselves from the infinite, and now we are limiting ourselves to this individual being. Naturally, we are going to become attached to our lifestyle as well. So the third klesha is raga. Attachments, attaching to our lifestyle, attaching to our personality, attaching to our belongings, our house, attaching to our emotional patterning itself, attaching to our paradigms. From there, we're going to continually shrink our bubble of comfort, and that brings us to dvesa, which is aversion. If we have reduced ourselves down to this individual and we have just shrunk our circle of comfort down to our what we feel holds up the story of our identity, then we will naturally have an aversion to stepping outside of our comfort zone. And we all know that growth seldom happens outside or within the comfort zone. That leads us to the final klesha, which is abhinivesa, fear. Ultimately, fear of death. If you think this is all going to end and you think this is all there is to it, this individual persona and this lifestyle that I've made for myself and the stories that I have built up to support my story about myself and my existence, you're going to think, well, this is all I got, I don't want it to end. So that inherent fear of death can also lead to suffering. And that cycles right back to avidya, ignorance of our own true nature as infinite source energy. So we like to use the 5 kleshas as a way to study within ourselves to see where in our emotional or spiritual patterning are we holding resistance. There is no specific spiritual lineage, no specific meditation or practice or religion that is the way. There is no one specific way. There are many different ways. But there is also an essence of surrender. The paths help us get up the mountain, but they'll only take us so far up the mountain. When you're up the mountain, you have to surrender everything, even your spiritual beliefs. And that can be the hardest things because we tend to attach ourselves to our belief system. We attach ourselves to our means of liberation. So finding where in our life we are out of balance, whether surrendering to the flow or taking action where is needed. And that helps really identify with an intention. That helps identify really where you're at emotionally in your practice, in your process. So working with psychedelics or entheogens or any serious spiritual path is, I feel, a microcosm, or another way of doing the work that Mary is doing with her clients. We are preparing essentially to die. When we work with spiritual practices or we work with entheogens, we are preparing ourselves to live in a way that we can let go when the time is right, removing the suffering from our existence so we can live in the moment without worry when it is going to end. So, I think that would lead us back to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some cool, amazing practices around the world from all time, and Mary's going to share a little bit about that.
Hey, thank you. So I really am activated by different cultures and around the world and looking at how they hold death. And so with this today, I was just going to talk about ancient Egyptians. And the reason why I resonate so much with them is because they were so detailed in every single process of death. And so detailed that hundreds and thousands of years after their practices are gone, we still have evidence of it because they preserved it so well, written it down so well. And so some of their practices we use today, mummification, embalming, kind of goes hand in hand. And some of their practices were also involving a lot of different things, but one thing I really love is they would do spells. I love the words and the act of power in our words and our voice. And they would also put these funeral and text on the coffins as well because they believed in immortality. They believed that once the body left, or once the spirit, the ka, left the body, they needed to preserve it so well because it would one day return and would need the food and the money and everything that would be buried with them alongside with their bodies. So they believed that we could return back to this physical form. And they, just how you've described the different kleshas, they saw the human spirit in 9 different forms. So they broke down the human spirit to the 9 different forms, and I'm going to go over it and I'm going to read it because some of these words I know. So the first one was that they considered was a part of the spirit was the body, and they called that the kat. And so that was just a part of the body, the spirit, the body, and the spirit were one. And then it broke down to the ba, and that part of the spirit would be the part of the spirit of the personality. And this was represented as a human face on a bird body. And this would be the body that would be able to float in and out of realms and be able to learn different things and come back to the body. So the ba was really important for them. And then there was the ren. They believed in the power of the name. And when they were born, they were actually given a secret name. And through this secret name, they could not be destroyed even after death. So this name would be kept a secret. And I kind of relate it to how how do I ever say this word? The meditation.
Transcendental meditation.
Thank you. Where you can't say your meditation out loud or speak it. So I really, when I learned that, I was like, oh, how neat is that it still resonates, that secret name that you're born with. And then was the ka, which was the vital essence of the body. They believed the goddess of childbirth and vitality would actually breathe in the ka at the moment of your birth. And this is the word that I always have a hard time with, so I'm going to spell it Shuyet, Shiet. 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 And that was the shadow. And so they thought that they believed that the shadow was a very unique part of the human spirit and a very unique part of the human personality and qualities. And the shadow was actually a servant to Anubis, which Anubis was the god of the afterlife who would actually weigh your heart against the feather. And then this next one, the way it's spelled is JB, so I don't even know how to pronounce it. And that is the heart. The heart was extremely important for the ancient Egyptians. This was the home of a human. This was the center of their emotions and your intentions. And when they would mummify the body, they would actually take out the heart, preserve the heart, put it back into the body. This is the only part of the body that they put back into. Everything else was put into different jars and containers and buried, the liver, the heart, the lungs, the spleen, all that stuff. But the heart would be mummified, put back in the body, and then they would put a magical amulet over the heart. And that was to preserve the heart space when they would have to go through the 12 chambers. Because when it came time to measure your heart against the feather, they wanted that heart to be as pure and as ready as possible to face Anubis. And then the next one is Nku, and that's the immortal self, and that's the combination of the Ba and the Ka. And it was more of the enlightenedness. When the Ka and the Ba met, that means that the funeral had done its proper processes, and now there was a unification of these two in the afterlife, meaning that they had gone past the 12 chambers of hell, is what they would call it, and now they have a reunification of the Ka and the Ba. The next one is Sahu, and this is the judge of the spiritual body. They don't know too much about this, but what they equate it to is part of the spirit would go to different places and visits different places that had impact on that person's life. So we would kind of equate it to like a haunting. We say, oh, somebody died in this space, or this is where my grandma really loved to be, her ghost or spirit is still here. That was what they would consider the Sahu. And same with the Sekhem, the life energy. They don't know too much about it, but what is written is when the spirit that had passed into the afterlife was worthy, that this would be another way that it would express its energy in the afterlife. And this is also where they believe that Horus and Osiris were reunited in the afterlife. So I really love the Egyptian way of them preserving these aspects of the spirit and the soul, and how they still translate so much to our everyday life, and especially in the embalming and the secret name and all that stuff. So that is the ancient death practice that I wanted to speak to you guys about, and just bring that into here. Yeah.
So, the death process. In the entheogenic world, especially with 5-MeO-DMT, yes, it is a very big awakening experience. There is a lot of real untrue stuff going around online right now, a lot of big claims. You know, a single inhalation of toad vapor will cure depression and anxiety for 4 to 6 weeks, or a lot of big things like that, or saying, you know, it is guaranteed to give you a non-dual experience. This isn't where everyone goes right away. Not everyone's ready to fully surrender. There's a lot of things to learn and accept and integrate into our body before we are ready to fully surrender the ego. But nonetheless, it can and does happen quite often. After an awakening like that, it is what the yogis would call a state of unabiding awakening, or an unabiding state of awakening. Two different types of awakenings. When we hear of enlightened masters, they're in a state of abiding awakening, where the veil is pulled down, but it doesn't go back up. Now, just because I just had a beautiful full release Godgasm with 5-MeO yesterday doesn't mean that I am walking around the rest of my days in blissful, ecstatic union with the Almighty and oceanic bliss. But just because we return to our baseline frequency afterwards does not mean that we have just come back to our original state. Once someone has had an awakening experience, regardless of what steps they take afterwards, they are in a process of awakening. Nothing can really stop or halt that process of unfolding when the bloom begins. When we have that initial catalyst, that initial remembrance of self, nothing is going to stop that from happening. It just may take longer sometimes. But during this process is a dying process in of itself. Just as people, after they have received news of terminal illness or something of the sort, people can witness a falling away of their reality, a falling away of their personality. And it's hard to describe, but I'll use myself as an example. I first tried 5-MeO, back in I think it was 2000, but I don't really count that as my first experience. I didn't let's say I didn't approach it very sacredly. But when I had my first full experience with this medicine, there was a period of time where it just paused me. I was witnessing, and I didn't realize it until really after it happened, that I was witnessing a crumbling away of a lot of my belief system, a lot of my spiritual beliefs, a lot of my paradigm in general. My whole story was crumbling, reshaping, and shifting and changing. And it was scary, it was challenging, as we, no matter how much work we think we do, I'm still attached to my story to a certain degree. There's still parts of my personality that I identify with. And as I'm watching parts of these start to shift, and watching myself attempt to teach things which I no longer felt true, I had to pull away from teaching. So that was probably when I stopped teaching your average yoga classes as we would think of it now. And I would say I had to, but I received the opportunity to go within and see what sort of beliefs I was still holding on to just because I got them with the New Age bag, or the yogi bag, or the spiritual bag. What beliefs were I still holding on to because they rang true after experiencing what I had experienced? And watching a lot of these old beliefs, because some of them being beliefs from my childhood, I had a very spiritual upbringing. And some of these things, had been attached to me for a long time, so letting it go was interesting. Watching that falling away. Adyashanti, one of my favorite teachers in the world, says spiritual awakening is a dangerous practice. It's a what did he say? I can't remember his exact words, but it's terrifying, it's messy, it's mucky. It's a lot of stuff has to come up to surface. So just as when someone is receiving that news, they're going to be processing a lot of things. Mary has an entire process that she goes through with people who've received that type of news to start to sort it out. And just like that, the ego does its own thing. So there have been practices for a long time to prepare the body for death as well, not just take care of it afterwards. So obviously I speak a lot about the yogis. The yogis had their own practices when it came to preparing for death and when it came to surrendering all that which we are. The scriptures, the Yoga Sutras, written between 300 and 800 BC, are essentially an outline to the human condition. They are essentially the handbook to creating a balanced relationship between ego and awareness. It's much easier said than done, but it's a wonderful adventure. And this is the path of yoga. Yoga means union. In the West, we have taken yoga to be a set of exercises or different types of austerities that we do. But we've generally lost the essence of it in the West. So when I say we do it through the yogic lens, we generally have nothing to do with physical postures, but more as in everything in between. How do we get control of this so we can experience, or actually, how do we just remember that we are experiencing it all? We'll simplify to that. And the yogis had some dramatic ways of doing this. There were certain austerities, like, I would say, forms of self-mutilation amongst the Shivaists. So Shiva would be the third out of the three deities in the original Hindu Trinity pantheon. The Hindu Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma being creator energy or generation, Vishnu being operation, and Shiva being destruction, G-O-D, or God. Three defining qualities to the universe. And from these three deities spring all the other qualities and characteristics, subgenres, if you will, and that is how we have the entire myriad of deities in the Hindu faith. It's an attempt to look at the infinite amount of qualities of the divine and understand the nature of our being. But anyway, Shiva. Shiva has quite the following in India, and you can always tell the Shiva worshippers as they are covered in ash, usually naked, dreadlocks, and a lot of them carry a trident. The Shiva worshippers, or Shivaists, have some habits like mutilation of the genitals, general ignoring of the physical body, and the aim of it is to detach from the physical body, to detach ourselves so the mind is no longer having to worry about the physical body and can focus on the other things. There is other practices. A certain Swami who I studied with for a while, I lived in his ashram in Rishikesh. he stood on one leg for 1 year and stood on the other leg for the next year. And that was part of his initiation when he was, I believe he was 14 years old when he began that and finished when he was 16. It's a little dramatic, but there were rigorous ways that people back in the day had to take to understand this. Now, we find the general meme is shifting. We're seeing that these practices that were once reserved for people of noble caste or high society in ancient civilizations are now becoming available to the householder. Raja Yoga, royal yoga, is now available to the householder and not just practiced by kings and rulers in India and Brahmins or of the highest caste. We are seeing that consciousness in its evolution is taking a chance to rid itself of a lot of behavioral patterns. And thus, I feel that entering these states that at one time seemed so inattainable or unattainable are now not only attainable to anyone willing to give it an honest effort, but are very attainable in many different forms for different types of personalities, for different paths, for different lives. And it's very beautiful. So we don't have to do these hardcore austerities, but it's wonderful to learn from them, to learn from their medicine. There was a beautiful old practice called Bhut Samadhi. Bhut Samadhi is where a yogi was buried underground for 3 days, initially cutting off oxygen, stopping the heart. This was first documented in 1903, I believe. T. Krishnamacharya, or the guy we would call the godfather of modern-day yoga. He's the one who introduced modern-day yoga as we know it to the West. But he was the first to show Western scientists that advanced yogis were able to not only slow down their pulse, but stop their heart to where they would be declared clinically dead and then would bring themselves back online. So learning from these sages and rishis that took so much care to understand the body-mind-spirit connection, taking the messages and learning. And it's very juicy. I was going to take questions right now for first round of questions, but I think we can go into our breath work and meditation first and then take all the questions. But yeah, so we can have some good juicy conversation at the end. But one of the most effective tools I feel that was brought forth by a yogic tradition was breath work, breathing techniques. This is known as pranayama. Pranayama it translates to restraint or control of the prana. Prana is our life force, our chi or our ki. So this is using the breath to shift and control our nervous system, to understand the way our mind works, to do all types of things. There are countless amounts of different techniques in this field, all of them for different things. So let's start by just closing our eyes. Bring your hands back onto your knees for a moment. Take a deep inhale through your nose. Open your mouth inside out. Another deep inhale. Letting your awareness focus on your breath, not attempting to shift it or change it at first, just becoming aware. Inhale deep into your belly. Let your navel expand out. Fill your belly. Now let your rib cage expand. Let your collarbones gently lift. Now as you exhale, surrender your collarbones down. Your chest softens. Rib cage softens. Navel draws in. Another full breath like this, inhaling slowly down to the belly. Filling, extending the navel. Feeling the rib cage extend out. Slightly puffing the chest as the collarbones lift. Exhaling, surrendering your collarbones down. Rib cage softens in. Navel draws in. Inhale. exhale. Inhale. And exhale.
And keep your eyes remaining shut. Continue to focus on your breath. If there's any tension in your body, relax it now. And I want you to imagine that this is the day of your death. You're safe. You are comfortable. You're surrounded with your friends and your family. Allow each one of your friends and family to say something to you now in this space. Receiving their love and gratitude for your time spent here in this body. Receiving their appreciation for your gifts. And as each friend and family member continues to love you, notice how you feel. Are you able to receive? Are you scared? And with your friends and family, wrapping up their appreciation and gratitude towards you, they walk out of the room one by one, leaving you in this space alone to reflect on your life with yourself. This is your time to reflect on your life's challenges, your loves, your losses, and your regrets. Allow the movie of your life to play in front of you now. Breathing into this space. Allowing your earthly attachments to your not good enoughs, not worthy enoughs, to circle back into your wholeness. It's in this place you understand that your wholeness came with all of it. Not one thing in your life could be left out. Each sadness, each triumph has made you whole, here and now. And as that movie scene, a movie of your life passes through you, you notice a light, a warm, vibrant, loving light that feels like home. Allow it to approach you, to merge with you, and to fill you here. Surrender into that light. Feel it carry you. Noticing that you've always been that light. As it reminds you it's time to come home. Thanking you for your journey here and the wisdom you shared. Just take a deep breath in. Suspended at the top. And release. You can wiggle your fingers and your toes and just make your way back into your physical body here. Back into this room, back into this space.
Rumi once said, "This place is only a dream. Only a sleeper considers it real. And then death comes like dawn, and you awaken laughing at what you thought was your grief." So, thank you for that. Are there any questions thus far? I'm just going to keep talking until someone has one. Yes.
What are some good ways to prepare for an ego dissolution experience over time?
Some good ways over time to prepare oneself for dissolution of ego or death of ego. The 5 kleshas, which I mentioned, is a great way to get there, but really any type of practice that allows you to see where you are still resisting. Playing the observer. Using tools that allow you to step outside of a reactive state and into a witnessing state. I would say developing a good relationship with the ego is very important there. There is that movement that we have that is to crush the ego and destroy the ego, but we have to have the ego. Don't kill it. Like you have to have it. To have this human experience, to be an individual, to walk this plane as we supposedly have chosen to, you have to have an ego. It's just not letting it run the show. That's the key. Not letting the ego just control everything, because it's its nature. I mean, the mind's nature through evolution is to survive. The mind doesn't know that it's wreaking havoc on our life. The mind doesn't know it's pulling us into states of resistance. The mind knows this, and the mind knows that it wants to keep doing this. So it's the mind's natural function to want to keep on doing this. So, taking care of the mind, seeing what parts of yourself are holding resistance at that area, and I would probably pass this to Mary to talk about some inner child work, because that is very relevant to helping people prepare and seeing where they are holding that resistance.
Yeah, I like to call it ego rebirth. I'm really into linguistics these days, and I feel like ego death has such a permanent thing, and we're not really trying to rid ourselves of anything. If anything, we're just trying to understand our mechanics and the technology and the stories inside of us so we can best hold them. So I like to say, ego rebirth. There are certain places throughout our story that are unavoidable, and at certain times in our life, we've had different traumas, different stories that have held a certain part of us still in that area. So, for example, if somebody has had sexual trauma and they've done the work, they've done maybe the psychedelics, and maybe they've done the therapy and medication or whatever their modality is, they've done the work, but still they're having a hard time relaxing into a space with their partner, being held in a certain way, being touched, or hearing certain phrases. When that happens, I really ask them to incorporate their inner child, because that little child is still there, still has a message, and it still wants to be acknowledged, and it still has something to teach. And so when we are so disconnected from that child, and I feel like I'm a mother to 30 people in my mind, like I'm like, where am I reacting from constantly is a practice in itself. And when we can start to make a connection with our inner child and allow them to still breathe through us, allow the creation, allow the wonder, allow the excitement of just being here, we somehow get to merge with that, and it just becomes one. It becomes a seamless relationship, and it becomes your children inside of you become your teacher. And then through that, then they begin to give other people permission to do the same thing. And I think having our inner child relationship is a very beautiful way to prepare for an ego rebirth, understanding where we're reacting from, observing where we're reacting from, and loving it. That's not, when I say love it, it's not the bliss love, because I think we've forgotten a lot in the Western culture what love really is. Love is the ugly part. Love is witnessing somebody to the end. Love is not turning away when it hurts. Love is the unconditional parts of ourselves. And so when we start to bring all that in, I think that's a really good way to practice that as a lifelong thing. And I wanted to share a little bit about, we have people that come to our retreats outside of the country, and some of them are my clients who are in transition. And I wanted to just share the difference in how we facilitate with somebody who's very alive and healthy and somebody who's transitioning. Besides the great amount of more medical stuff that we go through screening and stuff like that, there's just one beautiful difference that I notice every single time. And so I just wanted to share that. The difference in serving somebody who's healthy, vibrant, versus somebody who's facing their mortality and death is that when they take the medicine, every single time there's 100% no fear. None. And that doesn't happen. I could say about 90% of the people who sit, even if they're seekers, have that anxiety, that fear, that unknown, that knot in their stomach before they get to the end of the roller coaster. And when it's somebody who's in transition, it's full surrender, full acceptance. And I think there's something there to be said. There's definitely something there to be said.
So, Johns Hopkins University, I do see a hand back there, I'll get you in one sec. Johns Hopkins did their study 1 year, 2 years ago. I believe it was an 84% percentile of people who worked with 5-MeO-DMT under proper set and setting experienced a mystical experience, or reported a mystical experience, and said that this reduced their fear of death greatly. So we do have statistics, and there's been a few other experiments done showing that a mystical experience or a full immersion into the infinite or loss of ego temporary does indeed ease our fear of death in many ways. All right, where was that hand back there?
I was just curious what sort of experience either one of you guys have with working people with like illnesses that, and like specifically on a physical level, that have like very real symptoms. Like, how often do you see actual recovery, like from that in a very, like, not just in the mind, but like a very translatable physical way? Like, is this something, I know you hear about it sometimes?
Do you mean recovery from the illness? Oh, that's not our aim.
Okay.
Not to say, yeah.
I would like to share on that because I understand what you're saying. People that I've served that are transitioning from this body, usually I'm meeting them, I don't know, anywhere from a couple months to a couple weeks before they transition. So this is something now where they're choosing this, and just the experiences that I've had. I mean, it might be a lot different with other facilitators, but they're really ready to understand it and see it. And so there's no more I'm trying to fix or trying to get myself out of this space. The people I work with are already at there, and they just want to know how to hold it in a new way. I do have a client right now who is stage 4 cancer, and my work with him looks a little different. He is still in a space where he's not ready to accept that. He wants to continue his life, and he wants to be here really bad. So my work with him would be the medicine of Reiki, the medicine of meditation. I take him through, so he's doing a lot of different test medications, tests like radium and different forms of treatment. And so if that's his form of treatment, I'm not there to change it or convince him otherwise. My job is then to just teach him that that's his medicine and he's choosing that. And so we go through guided meditation, and as that is dripping through his veins, we're talking about it, and that's merging with his cells and working through him. And that seems to be really helping him right now. It's really helping unlock certain things in him, and with each one of his rounds of medication, he's actually coming back from it feeling like he had the full medical door open and the full spiritual door open. And I think when we have both open, it's a really beautiful thing. So I am seeing some results or some kind of change around with just the way that he's approaching his medications. So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yes. I think that maybe, like, I'm also realizing that, like what your specific work is to, like, mostly the people you're working with, you're transitioning them through death, so they've already, like, made the decision, like, to accept that. But I would imagine that you have to confront sometimes, like, when is that line between, like, the focus should be acceptance of death and letting go, and like when should it be like focusing actually on like recovering in life?
I let them guide that.
You what?
I let them guide that. So my permission is always with their spirit, and so the permission of when they say, okay, I'm ready to now see this differently, then we go into that. So I'm really always just working with where their capacity's at, and then I rise or fall to wherever to meet them on that level of their understanding.
What if they don't know where they're at? Like, what if they don't know if they're in or out, but they're
yeah.
That stuff?
So that's so I did work with somebody who the family reached out to me, and at the time when they reached out to me, this person was coherent, able to speak, able to share, communicate. And my appointment with this person was 2 days later, and within 2 days, this person went into what we call immediate death. They were starting to go down that road. And so when I got there was no communication. They were lying dead, just still and in a dream-like state. And so when that happens, I'm more than working with the family and seeing what they need as far as support. And then we do a lot of different, meditations and surrounded her body and kind of did a meditation like that a little bit, but using like her fishing boat and incorporated different things about her life specifically, because she could still hear. Hearing is the last thing to go. So, even though she didn't know she knew, but even though she wasn't able to communicate with me, this is what I need, it was just about dropping into the family space and then dropping into the space I felt around her and still asking permission, still asking to be of service, and then just allowing whatever comes to be there. And really, I get out of the way a lot. I feel like I am in that space. My physical body's in that space, but most of the time I'm like on the sidelines, just like, well, this is interesting. And then I jump back into my body and it's like, oh, okay, cool. So I feel like there's more for this question though. I want to expand a little bit more with you. So afterwards, if you want to get together and we can share and go back and forth, that would be great. Yes.
I have a question. Well, first off, thank you both so much, like, for the work that you're doing. I feel so blessed to be here right now, and I wanted to kind of get some clarification. You mentioned that there was a practice where they were being buried. What was that called again?
Bhut Samadhi. BHUT.
And so I find that fascinating because it kind of makes me think that about some of the Buddhist monks, how they would do something similar where they were like cutting off their windpipe or whatever and it's I wonder if that's something that brings you to another brainwave state besides the whole theta delta, like outside that realm, or you
Most has shown gamma, from what I can remember. From what I can remember, gamma seems to be unity state. Seems to be just unity frequency. But I can be way off on that. But that's just what I've heard.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For the Bhut Samadhi, and there was Buddhist practices very similar. It's full on. I mean, that's really how the Sikh faith started. Sikhism began with Guru Nanak, who did an underwater Bhut Samadhi in the 1500s, where he was underwater for 3 days, they say, and came out, and the first thing he says was, "There's no Hindus and no Muslims." At that time they were at war, and so there's But it's it's hard to say what is, because as of many lineages and religions and faiths, it is littered with folklore and tale. What is true, what is not true, who knows? But luckily enough, we've had some of it scientifically documented, so they do know that certain yogis were able to stop their heart and able to go long periods of time. They've documented in 1970, I want to say 77, they had a Buddhist monk put in an airtight chamber for, I want to say 3 days. It was something, yeah. So it's out there. There's a whole lot we can do. We just don't know it yet.
This whole thing with death is kind of confusing, obviously, because it's so strange. And my question is, like Paul asked, how do we prepare? But then, let's say my experience, especially my latest experience with Aya, is this, like, trauma comes up, I dissociate, and I'm experiencing every 5 seconds like I'm dying.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you is, like, while you're in ceremony, and maybe you're not thinking 100% straight, obviously, because you're under the influence, but then what are some tools that you would suggest that I could use, because this is a repeated thing for me, this constant death thing, as a form of dissociation of the stuff that's coming up.
Yeah.
And so then, like, how do I navigate that? I'm actually experiencing physicals, not breathing, and I'm like,
How much are you trying to navigate it?
I'm not. It's just like,
I would keep that up.
It's like just taking.
Yeah.
It's with that, I find that the more we try and do, the more confusing it gets.
Yeah.
A lot of it is just processing. It's got to come up to be released. It's got to come in our awareness. It's got to get let go.
How do you that? And then you're in your head.
Because once we start thinking about how we can get out of it or how we can shift it, we automatically go into pathological thinking.
Right.
It's the human conundrum.
Yes.
It is, we are human beings that are constantly attempting to become human doings.
Yes.
And somewhere in between is the truth. And the truth is on a different level for every single person and at different points in their life. finding how much to surrender and how much to act is going to be an individual thing per moment. Within medicine experiences, I personally feel that I am best served when I attempt to do nothing within them. I was given a mantra in medicine experience one time by awareness that was, it doesn't matter. Anytime I started trying to figure out what was happening in a vision, it doesn't matter. Anytime I started to analyze what state of consciousness I feel I had just reached, it doesn't matter. Anytime I wondered, am I ever going to come back from this? It doesn't matter. All the above. It just became my mantra of surrender. And I give it out to people. Feel free to use it. It's a sacred mantra, been used for millennia.
Got it. Thank you.
And then I would work on a lot of heart space stuff. And before.
Well, that's where the trauma is.
Yeah,
So
but the heart space, as far as like when you're saying it's all up here, really working on what the heart space is trying to show, right? Trying to teach. So in this world, before taking the medicine, let's say really start doing the work on the heart space. Really start tapping into that area here in this body, in this mindset, in this frequency. Really start to do the work here, because the medicine isn't going to fix it. It's going to show where it's at, and then so it's up to us outside of it to really drop into that space and do the work outside of the medicine. So heart space just was coming up so much when you were speaking, just dropping into there. And I drop into my heart space in medicine by just my breath.
Mm-hmm.
Just really breathing in and taking that swirl up here, and I just bring it down as far down as I can get it.
Yeah.
So one of the guides that sat with me, in the end, she just basically gave me this mantra of, without the mind, there is no fear. And she just kept sitting there and repeating it over and over. That made a difference. But yeah, the death thing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And yet it does.
Yeah, it's the conundrum.
But then it doesn't. The cycle.
Yeah, the serpent chases its tail.
Well, thank you for the courage that you have to do the work that you do, because I think it's tremendously difficult and it's so important. One of the things that comes to mind is that I think when you're meeting your final moments, I think it's human nature to be filled with regrets, and also I think all of us need to forgive, and I think to achieve full forgiveness is, I know it's difficult for me, I imagine it's difficult for most people. How do you guide the people that you work with through that process? Because they have a limited amount of time to go through a lot of regret and a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of us haven't done that work throughout our lives.
So everyone's different with their level of forgiveness, and as Joël would say, the samskaras are our stories and the things. So it's really about getting in touch with where they're at with their forgiveness and how they even hold what is forgiveness to them. We start there. What does that mean to forgive? Because some people, that means that person got away with it. Mm-hmm. So we really want to tap into just like the essence of forgiveness, the essence of the keys. Forgiveness unlocks and teaches at the baseline of it. And so really understanding how they hold that, we start there. And then, some people have unfinished business and regrets with people who have passed already. Mm-hmm. So like, how do you go back and go through there? So I'll take them through a meditation where they can go through this again. And one, they can either choose to hold it in a new way, or two, they can choose to change the story. Say what they need to say there. Say what you release that in that moment. And when you take them out of the mind and into this luminous space where everything is possible, that's where I like to guide them and take them in, and then let them find their own inner guru. Because I'm not there to be the fixer. I'm just there to hold that space and to show them that their inner wisdom is really, really powerful. And so teaching them where that lies by just holding that space is something that we walk through. All the time. That's something that happens quite often, and each person's unique frequency of forgiveness and unfinished business, it tells a different story. But usually when we get to a certain point in the meditation and understanding where it's at in their body, even where is this anger, where is this frustration, where was this trauma, so we even go through where it is in their body, and we'll push there. and we'll talk there, and we'll move it there, and we'll shake it out there. And usually through those movements, they come back around, and it feels a little different. And I always say it comes back around because that story never leaves us. The story of grief and the story of unforgiveness and all of our stuff doesn't leave us. And so when it comes back around, usually they hold it in a different way because they've got different tools and a different capacity. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Hey there.
Hi.
So I'm really curious if it's possible to draw a parallel between the stages of death or the dimensions, or as the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls them, the different bardos, with maybe different experiences that you've had either in meditation or with the different substances. I'm just, for myself, wanting to kind of map that out, curious what is possible to experience here. For instance, this going into the pure light sounds a little like maybe what 5-MeO does to you. And then there's the part where they say you kind of have a choice to stay up in that higher dimension after you passed, or, to the best of my memory here, another kind of a mental body actually starts to form, which could be like the astral, which to me might indicate maybe a trip from like regular DMT where people go through and they actually are communicating with other beings. I guess that's where I'm going, just to hear your take on that, how you might do that, like mapping between those two.
So between psychedelics and the different stages of death?
Yeah.
I'll let you take that. Yeah.
So, absolutely, I feel the different bardos or states of awareness in between here and cessation of self can be explored through entheogens and put to those practical maps. I would speak from my own experience. I would use yogic terms rather, as they are just more familiar to me. But we can speak of bodies, as awareness can go to different bodies or koshas. I find with that special place where one can go on 5-MeO, where it's not all the way, but just about there, as Rak Razam would call it, at the edge of the cauldron, where you can see and witness all of infinity before you, but you are not fully of it. You are not fully submersed into it. You have not fully lost yourself. I believe that to be the fifth and outermost body, called Anandamaya Kosha, or the bliss body. So in yogic philosophy, there are 5 bodies of our awareness, or 5 layers that our awareness can occupy that still encompass our individual self. There's Annamaya Kosha, which is, I think it translates literally to body of food. So, the physicality. Then of the way we have our emotional body, we have subtle body, the causal body. And then we have Anandamaya Kosha. Our awareness can go out into any of these bodies. In just simply by going into deep meditation, we take ourselves out of Annamaya Kosha, as we are taking awareness out of the physical body. I guess that would more be the practice of pratyahara. So with any medicine where you get to a state to where it is no longer your external senses running the show, I believe, as you mentioned, NNDMT, going on a journey, I believe that could fit that build where there is, the awareness is beyond the physicality. Except with NNDMT, I feel the awareness is going to the 6th chakra, the 3rd eye. That, aka the pituitary gland, or master gland of our entire endocrine system, controls and deals with, or is connected to, limitless possibilities. All the points that a particle could be in a wave, essentially. All probabilities within this existence of probabilities. Anything that can be imagined, thought, sung, did, done, anything exists in this realm. I believe in Kabbalist terms it would be known as the visionary realm, emerging into the archetypal realm. Ayahuasca can take us into those archetypal states, so can 5-MeO before full immersion, where it is beyond the visionary states of the energies and more into the archetypal umbrella energies that make up the human awareness. And then beyond that is just non-dual. So I would say 5-MeO in its peak experience would take you to the non-dual. But as far as using entheogens to specifically explore these geographies, it is being experimented with and played with. I've been joining up with a little group. We've been going down to Mexico every here and then and doing a that is made up of just yogis. It's been about 5 or 6 of us, all very practiced yogis as well as practiced psychonauts. And we've been experimenting with low doses, multiple rounds, and combining old technology. So we've done some sessions that involve chanting ancient mantras with before or after, different breathing techniques, different techniques that were used by rishis, just adding a bit of medicine. So we're documenting, and there will be published material at some point in the near future. But more research is needed at all times.
Always more research.
Yes.
I was going to ask, is 5-MeO-DMT the only medicine that you use in your retreats, or do you work with other medicines as well?
We mainly focus on 5-MeO-DMT, yes. As external substances that we use, we like to focus our attention on one. And plus, if it's a retreat, well, only a few days. That's a lot it's a lot to process in a few days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of retreats you're hearing about that's Aya, Iboga, combo, like 6 different things in a weekend. It's wild stuff.
It's a wild ride.
Yeah, no, I would say our retreats are mainly focused on spiritual emergence, and 5-MeO is used as a tool in it.
With my women's retreat, though, we will be using cacao. And I believe that's a beautiful medicine, and it's light. So with the women that come to our retreat in Mexico, we do cacao one day just to really get into that space and ecstatic dance and really get in, and then the next day is medicine. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So if one, or you, or by you I mean me, had like a really bad experience with psychedelics at a younger age, how can you prepare for experience in the present day? Because when I think about it, I'm just like,
When I spoke about that gap of time where I didn't work with any substances, that was after some really bad trips. In the 90s, as I said, I was a card-carrying psychonaut, but I didn't have any disciplines or practices or notion of integration. And I was a heavy doser too. I was eating 20 hits of acid at a time and really going for it back then. I subsequently had one of the scariest experiences of my life, and I think 98 were, just full breakdown of the mental body, just thinking that you're never going to return from it. Nothing made sense. And a few really bad trips after that. Mushrooms I stopped doing first, because every time I did mushrooms, it was just taking all my inner problems and putting them front and center, being like, you're fucking up. And I didn't want to look at it. So I had some really bad trips. I mean, really, really scary ones. So I didn't touch psychedelics at all forever. And then, if you go a few months without doing psychedelics, you start to build up a little pre-flight anxiety. You go a few years, it starts to get thicker and thicker. So my fear before my first re-entry into entheogens was big. I was terrified to touch them again. I remembered that uncomfortableness. I remember that something to it that always made me want to avert myself to something. I was never comfortable, and and then all the different things that could emerge, and just knowing how many doors it can unlock in the mind. I was terrified. But that fear is part of the medicine. It is part of the process. It is a gift. And I find we can use medicine of that fear as in discernment. Discernment is in choosing wisely who and what we work with and how we do it. So learning from our fear, but not letting it control us. And eventually it's just going to be taking that plunge, because we can try and prepare people all day. But it's like skydiving. You know you're going to be fine, but it's a ride down.
do you find though that people that have had a really bad experience in the past, that they're more likely to have a bad experience?
No, but more likely to have more fear building up to it. But I would not say likely to have a bad one. Back in the day, we thought of them as bad trips. Now we call them challenging experiences. Now we know that a bad trip is really just it trying to show us something that we may not want to see. And from the 5 kleshas, I know that I should not have aversion to that which makes me uncomfortable, or else I will not grow. So in a bad trip, if it starts to get dark, it's really all about just surrendering to it and saying, okay, what have you got to show me? And as soon as we let go of our attachment to it being comfortable or beautiful, we can receive the medicine. Yeah.
And then also, really, I have a lot of fear around psychedelics, and I'm very much in the world of psychedelics, and so I can say that what's helped me is understanding my intention behind why I want to do the medicine. My intention is everything. My intention is what is guiding me there. And so when I have a full understanding of the message of why I'm there, that feels great. But I also talk to the medicine before I do it. I make it my ally. I welcome that spirit with me. I welcome it in, and I ask for the peace. I ask for the understanding in difficult times as they arise. And I ask that it hold me during the experience and to still work with me long after the experience goes, because I know that initiation is just an initiation, and that medicine will continue, that spirit will continue to work through me and through me work with other people. So I take that conversation very seriously, and I hold the medicine and I hold it to my heart, and I take as long as I need to before whatever way you're going to receive it, ingest it or whatnot. So.
Any final questions? Yes.
Yeah. Do you have some suggestions for integration tools, actions, practices?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say the container for integration in which we have dubbed the Tryptamine sutras, and it is essentially Patanjali's 8-limbed practice of yoga as made for step-by-step practical use for psychedelic integration. The first 2 limbs there are yama and niyama. So I feel that yama and niyama sets the foundation for embarking on spiritual work and making sure you're doing it with integrity. Yama and niyama, it's 10 kind of disciplines and rules and notions to consider. And one is ahimsa, nonviolence to all sentient beings, including nonviolence towards yourself with harmful thoughts. Another is satya, which is truthfulness, being truthful in your communications, being truthful with yourself. Another is svadhyaya, which is self-study, which is taking an observer state and being consciously aware of your emotional patterning at all times, watching your emotions, and instead of attaching to them, observing them and studying them. So this essentially sets our guidelines. And then the third limb is asana, which are the physical postures. And this is essentially to strengthen the nervous system in order to house and facilitate spiritual emergence, as well as to train the body to be able to sit comfortably for longer periods of time. So we don't have a whole lot of focus on that one. The fourth is pranayama. And for integration, there's different pranayamas we'll give different people. The pranayamas are breathing techniques. So a medicine experience can be a big zap to the nervous system. And it's really good to, first thing, just start stabilizing things, get everything back in order, get grounded. So let's say a person feels a little out of balance and is having a little trouble finding their balance after that. So part of their integration, we may give them nadi shodhana or anuloma viloma, a type of alternate nostril breathing when you're stimulating both hemispheres of the brain, in turn stimulating sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So using different breathing techniques essentially to help move that energy. There are more aggressive types of pranayama that we may offer that's usually done guided, that's more to help bring up and release trauma. There's different ones that's to find solidarity and really find that lioness in your search. Not lioness in your search, but find that, lion within you. Other ones to find a more yin, calm, silent approach. After that, we have pratyahar, which is the practice of withdrawing the awareness from the 5 external senses. So we feel to really allow spiritual emergence to unfold, or to integrate something that is so beyond this, integrated into our daily lives, we have to start using more than our 5 external senses. And to really hone that, we have to take a break from them for a little. So the practice of pratyahar is tuning our awareness within. And there's a lot of different tools we'd give in that. There's a great quote on pratyahar where they said it was, pratyahar is a buffer space in between what happens to you and your reaction to it. So it's feeling everything that's going on in here. After pratyahar, we have dharana, which is further honing in the mind. And this is intense focus on one-pointedness. This could be focus on a candle game, Tradaka. You know, just gazing on a candle flame. Anytime your mind wavers, just bring it back to it. This could be gazing into the eyes of an enlightened master in a picture. This could be gazing into a yantra, you know, a piece of sacred geometry, like this vibe, Sri Yantra. Gazing into the center of it and keeping your focus solely on that. That is harnessing the mind for one-pointed focus. From dharana comes the seventh limb, which is dhyana. Dhyana is total absorption into the present moment. It is flow state. It is meditation. It is the ceasing of doing and finding that balance with allowing. It is that opening that we feel, whether we are in deep meditation or with a beautiful medicine, that beginning of connectivity. And that leads to the eighth, and we can never say final limb because the rabbit hole never ends, but the eighth limb is samadhi, or full cessation of self with merging into the infinite. So we use this as step-by-step integration specifically for 5-MeO, though I coined it first for every entheogen, really. But it's how do you take something that transcends thought and transcends language and bring it into your daily experience? Whether you're using yogic techniques like we give, or there's different Western techniques we give as well, it's essentially figuring out your patterning, watching what was brought up in the medicine experience, and possibly even not just in the medicine experience, but watching what comes up afterwards and playing the observer, using svadhisthya, paying attention to what comes up, because when we crack ourselves open, things are going to start coming to the surface. We don't just get rid of everything, you know, in a medicine experience. It would be wonderful, but, you know, it cracks open the jar and then things are going to start leaking out bit by bit. The older the trauma, the older the thought pattern, the more generations back it stems from, the longer it may take to come up. It may come up very present in your awareness. It may come subtly. It's about paying attention, noticing what life is throwing at your face, and understanding that at any given moment in time, life is giving you exactly what you need. It is just up to us to receive it and understand and take the medicine from it. So let's say I have a thought that pulls me out of unity consciousness, we'll say. I have a thought, my wife says something to me that just triggers me.
Slow down, you're driving too fast.
Yeah, something like that.
He's really triggered by that one for some reason.
And I immediately start to feel myself well up. The ego starts to inflate. How dare you insult my driving? And then instead of reacting, instead of going on that pattern, because when an emotional pattern becomes a pattern, it is where we go by default. She says that. I don't think about the fact, ooh, I want to get pissed about that. I just go right for it. Because just as if we pour water down our skin, it's going to form a few streams of droplets, and all the rest of the water is going to follow those. It is the path of least resistance. When we form neural bridges in our brain, we are forming easy pathways for our emotions to take. So instead of going down that roller coaster of anger towards my beautiful wife, I stop and I say, okay, I am feeling this welling up. I am feeling this coming up in me. Why? Why is it doing like this? I take this thought that is pulling me out of my unity feeling love for my wife and looking at it, okay, it really gets to me like this because I can just hear her saying it in my mom's voice, and that takes me back to then. Oh yes, and then this comes from this, and et cetera, until I've taken that string, pulled it all the way back to its roots to see where it stemmed from, or perhaps not even. Sometimes they stem far beyond our own immediate life, but we can let it go. And then it's about taking every thought that pulls you out of remembering that you are the infinite, beautiful being that you are, and investigating that thought. It's a relentless practice, but it is very fruitful. But understanding where we go, pulling at each of those threads, eventually we unravel the whole veil. And I feel that's what true integration is, because psychedelics pull the veil, lift the veil, thin the veil to some degree, sometimes to the full degree, all the way. So it's about seeing what it did, what it brought up, and then investigating every little thing that comes up. Yeah.
And then I would also like to add a lot of self-love. A lot of self-love. As Joël says a lot, fake it till you make it. Out when you come out of a ceremony, just give yourself that love right back to yourself, that appreciation, that worthiness that you've just come through this experience with so much more than you came into it with. Journaling really helps a lot of people put it down on paper and just see it working through your hands. I say that's really great. And then setting up really healthy boundaries when you come out of a medicine ceremony. A lot of times we go and we're the only person in our union or in our family dynamic that is experiencing these and going forth and being the psychedelic sheep in your family, so to speak. And so really explaining that to the people that you come back to, like your boundaries of, hey, I'm going to need to meditate every morning, and I'm going to need that quiet space, I'm going to need that quiet time, I'm going to need to go to the spa and really show myself love, and I just letting people around you know what you need coming out of the space of being reborn is really powerful too.
Mm-hmm. They say it takes the brain 40 to 55 days to change a pattern or change a habit. What we really like to do is set a 40 to 55 day container for afterwards, where someone can take a few minutes out of every day and just touch back in to that experience, whether it's meditating on the experience, meditating something that came up, but something they can do to touch in each day and keep it going daily so it becomes a part of their life. I think integration sometimes needs to take an aggressive road. Sometimes it's a more passive practice, but it's I love to nerd out on it. I love to really get intricate with it and see all the small roads that it takes me. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, my friend.
Do you have any experience with Vilka?
Ooh, Vilka. Well, my closest experience to that would be Yopo. I had Vilka offered to me by one of our friends when we were kind of on the same part of the entheogenic circuit. We ended up in Mexico at the last Weeback, and he was like, yeah, we'll just go upstairs and I'll administer some. I was like, yeah, let's not do it right now. No, I've experienced Yopo, and from what I hear, Vilka is very similar, as they both contain 5-MeO-DMT as well as a few other alkaloids. I found it very different from Bufo or straight 5-MeO. Very different. Found it very earthy. Found it very, very different. But it had that essence. There was that 5 essence. But really, after you do 5, everything has that essence.
Yeah.
So who knows? But it was a powerful snuff. I don't know if I ever want to do it again. Yopo is probably the only one that I've done. Like, I don't know if I need to do it again. Yeah, but I had 3 cups of Aya in me too, so it was a dramatic scene. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, all right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Psychedelics. Really cool. Thank you, Mama.